Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Dan Perkins is a registered investment advisor with 43 years' experience in managing money.
Dan Perkins here, your co-host, along with Don Mazzella of Recalculating for Small Business. Our radio program is dedicated to you, helping the small business owners increase their profits. We draw our name from Recalculating, voted the best small business book of 2017 by the Independent Press. In this book, it features ways to grow your small business. Now, here's Don Mazzella.
Dan, as you know, small businesses either grow or die. That is a fundamental fact of our economy. Here to talk about how to optimize growth is Jason Green, whose book, not surprisingly, is called Optimizing Growth, is out. Jason, welcome to Recalculating Radio.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Before we go further, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company and where people can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a managing director at Alvarez Marsal, and within Alvarez Marsal, I lead our growth and customer experience practice, and the book reflects a lot of those experiences and case studies. And I can be reached at jgreen, just like the color Green, at alvarezandmarsal.com.
Well, can you tell, that's a brief thing, but tell our audience a little bit about Alvarez, what
sure.
you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Alvarez and Marsal, it's a large firm. It's headquartered in New York, has offices all over the world. And Alvarez and Marsal has several different aspects to it. It really began in the restructuring and turnaround business in the 80s, and since that time has added a consulting practice, of which I'm in. And within the consulting practice, again, I lead the growth and customer experience team to help clients across industries and across global markets tackle the growth issues that they're trying to achieve.
Well, I'm going to start off with an interesting question. You focus on growth. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. What is the main thrust of your book? What are the two or three main thoughts that you want our audience to hear about your book and how you go about organizing growth?
Yeah. So the book really focuses on how to drive profitable growth, particularly within our current environment where there's so much disruption, right, being caused by the shift to digital, other technologies more broadly, the transition to millennial consumers, and then new competitors coming oftentimes from non-traditional sources as opposed to the traditional industry. And then the book provides principles and case studies and approaches to help really any type of business identify and capture the growth opportunities available to them. And what we try to do in the book is make sure that these approaches that we share reflect a range of capabilities, from really pretty simple back-of-the-envelope exercises and thought experiments to sophisticated big data analytics. And as you were pointing out, I think for small businesses in particular, but really for any kind of business, three of the things that we really focus on are the idea of understanding and anticipating where demand is going to be by understanding what's shaping demand. Secondly is really segmenting the market in ways to identify both who you're winning with, how you can find more customers like them, but also who you're not winning with and what you might be able to do about that. And then thirdly, aligning your value proposition to the demand in the market and differentiating it from your competition. So I think those are the three kind of cornerstones.
Well, that's a great summation. I'm going to ask one question and turn it over to Dan. And my question is, disruption. It seems to be the biggest word in the world today. If you're a small business, are you a disruptor or are you being disrupted? Would you care to comment on that? And
yeah, sure. It's a great point, and we're seeing it in industry after industry, right? Retailers are being massively disrupted by online and digital. Many businesses across the board, financial services, banking. The car insurance industry is completely different now, or becoming quite different, because today's millennials don't always buy a car. They don't always look to get their driver's license as soon as they're old enough, in part because they're using ride-sharing services like Lyft and Uber, and they're moving to urban environments in big numbers, so they don't really need a car. So there's softening demand, if you will, for car insurance, and at the same time, within car insurance, you have these new technologies that measure your driving, that you plug into the car, and it tracks how many miles, how fast you were driving, all these other metrics, and you can pay for your insurance by the mile rather than paying a sort of a flat fee for insurance regardless of how many miles you drive. So it's just a couple of examples: retail, car insurance, media, right, being shifted to things like Netflix rather than traditional TV viewing. Across just industries, just those are a couple of examples where disruption is taking place. And I think to your point, you can either sit back and watch this disruption happen to your business and kind of suffer the consequences, or you can think about how you might disrupt the industry you participate in, or how you might be more disruptive in your own business model to take advantage of these things.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Dan now.
Thank you. Let's talk about disruption in a different way. Let's talk about, I was at a conference this morning and we were talking about the Federal Reserve's policy on interest rates. And last Friday, the Atlanta Federal Reserve said that they expect the GDP in the second quarter of 2018, this quarter, to come in somewhere between 4.8 and 5.3%. Now, small business, big business, has been living under a scenario for 8 years that America would never see 3% growth again, that America's best days were behind it. And by the way, you didn't build it, we built it for you. And so a whole structure in the thinking process was forcing companies to think defensively as opposed to offensively. And now we have this huge turnaround in the economy, and some, including myself, believe it's just getting started. And we're faced with a 3.8% national unemployment rate, some areas of the country 2% or less. Some areas of the country are offering $10,000 or more to come in and buy a house to take a job that's open in their particular state. So there's been a major disruption in the thought process of where the economy is going, what the business opportunities are, and what you as a businessman, large or small, are doing to deal with the challenges that are coming your way very soon. But what we find in the surveys that we've been having people on who've been taking surveys is that many small business people don't believe that the numbers are really going to happen. They've been so ingrained to think another way, it is hard for them to readjust their thinking. Do you have any comments there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because it goes back to one of the principles that I was just flagging in the book around anticipating demand in your market. And underneath that is understanding what we call the forces and factors that are driving demand. So if you can think about, what is happening with interest rates, what is happening with technology, with demographics, so that what's going to impact your customer and your marketplace, and by anticipating those things, again, taking the time to step back for a minute and looking sort of comprehensively at that, it sounds like, from what you're pointing out, you might think about actually going more on the offense and anticipating how are you going to staff your business when unemployment gets really tight, right? What kinds of technologies could you leverage if you're going to be in that situation, and anticipate those things, so that you have the plans in place as those things unfold, rather than being surprised by them.
Well, one of the things that's going on is that the business community is looking at this labor shortage becoming more and more acute as the economy. I mean, if we had a 5 to 6% gross domestic product for any significant period of time, multiple quarters in this country, our economy would be in serious trouble because we don't have the human resources to fill the demand. And I think that that is a very real possibility. I have grave concerns that American business has solutions, because it isn't a matter of just going out and finding more people. It's a limited supply and a pool of capital, especially as the Fed said last Friday that they believe that economic activity is going to pick up on a global basis. So there'll be a global demand for people at a time when populations are shrinking. It's a big issue that could have tremendous impact on not only our economy, but the economies of the rest of the world. It's the greatest challenge that I see to making the economy grow and on a reasonable way in which we can support it. If we can't support it, it's going to be a serious problem.
Yeah, and within that kind of context, that's where there might be ways to rethink and restructure the work that gets done, what can be done on an automated basis, how to leverage digital capabilities to handle, maybe customer service or returns, specifically if you're a retailer, and so on and so forth, so that you can, so that you can take advantage of the growth ahead without having that growth restrained by the lack of skilled labor.
What do you think, from your perspective and your firm's perspective, what do you think are the 2 or 3 very significant challenges facing both large business and small business today?
Well, again, so I've touched on one of them. One is the disruption that's happening broadly, and again, within that, a lot of it is coming from digital transition. So we work with a lot of clients who are trying to transition to a digital business model, right? That they've fallen behind the kind of digital revolution, if you will, and maybe they have some pockets of capability in the digital area, but they really haven't transitioned to fully becoming a digital business model. And there's a number of implications underneath that in terms of how nimble you can be, how responsive you are to what customers are looking for. In other words, increasingly millennials expect to have digital capabilities, very strong digital tools to work with you or to be a customer of yours. So digital is clearly one of the major issues that companies are struggling with to move from that traditional business model to a digital one. I think the other one that for a lot of our clients is the expectations of millennials, right? So there's a lot of discussion around banking and how millennials expect to, do they really want to work with a traditional bank, or are they going to what's called fintech, financial technology companies, where things are almost completely automated for wealth management and other banking needs? Do they really trust some of the traditional CPG brands that the boomers grew up with and maybe they grew up with, or are they looking for greater transparency on labels, different brand names, more organic focus? So there's a lot of pressure on traditional businesses. I mentioned car insurance, right? There's a number of things that are happening in that particular marketplace that reflect those kinds of pressures.
I want to ask one more question, then I'll turn it over to Don, because I'm fascinating it, and I need you to clarify a point. You talked about, and you used the word digital. I wonder if you could be a little more elaborative of what do you mean by digital, because I'm not sure, not that I necessarily disagree with you, but I'm not sure what you mean when you're saying that. So please help us.
Oh, sure. So, digital and, kind of, it's a great call out because digital and, big data are kind of buzzwords or terms that get thrown out there. But increasingly, consumers and business-to-business customers the consumers are living their lives online, right? And business-to-business customers are doing more of their, conducting more of their transactions online. And so what we think about is the entire what we call digital path to purchase. Where does somebody start looking for your product or service? What resources do they use? What websites do they go to? How do they learn about you? Secondly, how do they cull the list down? Do they look at ratings and reviews and cull it down from 8 choices to 3? Where do they move to next in terms of that path to purchase? What are the key criteria that they have for their decision making, and how do you intercept them at the right times, at the right place, and how do you influence them in terms of getting your product or service in front of them, but then also winning with them overall?
Good, super. Don, back to you.
I have a lot of questions, but Jason, I'm going to go back. You get a new client. What are the questions you ask them first in the process of working with a new client?
Yeah, great question. So we really try to diagnose the situation and what's happened. And a lot of times what clients are telling us in the last couple of years is that the traditional playbook that had made them so successful has slowed down, that it's not working the way it used to. It's not having the kind of impact it did. And it's really a gut-wrenching situation because these teams or these entrepreneurs grew up using that playbook, and it kind of built the success that they've enjoyed. And now all of a sudden, because of this, these changes in the environment and in the demand from their customers, suddenly that playbook isn't working as well. So most of the questions go around understanding what they have traditionally done and what levers that they use and what's happening in terms of how it's slowing down or where it's slowing down, so that we can start pinpointing where the biggest issues to focus on are.
Well, that's a great answer. Now, having asked the questions, what do you do next in your process?
So the next couple of things typically are, again, understanding this notion of the forces and factors that are shaping demand in the marketplace. So what things are happening externally that are shaping demand from customers or consumers. And then the next piece, if you boil down the way we think about strategy, it really boils down to who you're trying to win with, what are you offering them, and how are you going to win, right? So the next piece is really about who is out there in the marketplace. What are the segments of customers and consumers that you would find most attractive and that you want to win with? Because that decision or that set of decisions are going to trigger what we're going to offer them and how we're going to do things in order to win with them.
Well, okay. Now, once you've done that, do you actually go in and do the implementation, or do you find people to do the implementation?
We do a combination of both. So we'll identify, for example, an innovative new offer based on understanding who those customers are and what's missing that's not working for them. But in terms of, and we'll figure out, how to reach those folks on social media or traditional media or what have you. But then we'll bring in people. We're not going to, once the product's been developed, we'll help with the prototype to a certain level. But then we bring in folks who have expertise in actually developing the product further.
Well, let's go a step further. In the world today, there's a large number of smaller enterprises where the founders are now reaching retirement age, and they're finding that their children don't want to get into the business. A, are you finding that, and B, do you help them identify that ways of monetizing their lifetime work?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have seen that, and it's oftentimes that it happens in the second generation, but even more so in the third generation, as you know, where the grandparents started the business and then the parents helped run it, and now the third generation in particular is not as interested in, or maybe doesn't have the skills to do so, and so we've helped companies in that situation make those transitions. In other words, determine through the work we'll do how can we maximize their growth opportunities, which then maximizes the valuation they can get if they decide to exit the company, or if they decide to create some kind of partnership and expand the company.
That's a great question. Can you give us an example, without violating privacy, of a company where you identified a problem and solved the issue?
Sure. There's a number of case studies in the book. One of them that's a lot of fun is, or at least most people find it to be fun, is Anheuser-Busch. So it really reflects a lot of the things we've talked about. They came to us, they were the king of beers, right? And they came to us because their traditional playbook had slowed down and they weren't seeing the growth that they had enjoyed in the past. Their original question to us was to help them get into the wine or spirits market because the growth in beer had slowed. And as we diagnosed the situation, what we found was, as we talked about earlier, the forces and factors in the market had shifted things on them. Today's millennial consumer, or 10 years ago when we were doing the work, these millennials had shifted to a much sweeter taste preference. So they didn't really adopt the beer in the way prior generations had. And what they were consuming instead were flavored vodkas, because vodka is an acquired taste. It doesn't require you, like coffee or beer, to acquire a taste for it. And by the way, the same thing was happening in the coffee market. Millennials were tending to get these much sweeter lattes and other kinds of coffee drinks rather than just black coffee. And so what we saw in that marketplace was the opportunity for Anheuser-Busch to introduce a new product, which was Bud Light Lime. And when it was introduced, it was the most successful new product introduced in the consumer packaged goods industry for that year. So it drove a significant amount of growth for them, whereas they had started from, hey, there are no growth opportunities left in the beer market.
Well, Dan, I turn it back to you for the last two questions.
Thank you. I'm going to give you a perspective that you may or may not have seen. But listening to the description of the various things that you're doing with companies, I wonder if there is a part of some of the leaders who, and maybe some have said this, maybe not, but maybe they've been thinking about it. That's just too much work. It's not what I'm interested in doing. I don't want to work that hard. Do you ever hear that?
Too much work? You mean too difficult to kind of embark on driving growth?
Changing our whole company.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an incredibly legitimate concern, and as you know, one of the things that we try to diagnose is change readiness for the organization, right? Because the last thing that you want is a strategy that's been developed that can't be implemented because either the organization doesn't have the skills that are needed, the organization doesn't have the leadership that's required, or frankly, they just don't have the will to go forward.
And they're looking at it from the standpoint, well, it ain't quite broken yet, so why do I need to fix it?
Yeah, right. And it's interesting because people oftentimes think we would be working with, the smallest, or not the smallest, but the sort of fifth player in a market or the seventh player in a market. And really, we often work with the number one or two player, not because they're the biggest necessarily, but because they have this kind of healthy paranoia, right? They became the king of beers in Anheuser-Busch's example or case, and they were worrying about why they weren't getting the kind of results that they had traditionally gotten. And those companies, I think to your point, those companies have a certain pride that says, this isn't acceptable, right? So they do have the will, and they do, and I really think it's the passion that kind of company has to continue to succeed.
Yeah, I was just reading an article over the weekend speaking about Anheuser-Busch, about the dislocation that's going on in the brewing industry, where Miller Coors was producing Pabst Blue Ribbon, and now they're saying that the demand has dropped, that they're not sure they want to continue to brew for Pabst Blue Ribbon, and what dislocation that would cause with the industry, and the fact that the amount of brewing capacity is continually declining as all these mergers come into place, and a whole major shift in the brewery business with more and more places closing, and people not sure what the real direction is going to be of all the major players. So there's a lot of disruption.
Again, another example of industry disruption as the market shifts to the microbrews. Right.
Well, Don, back to you.
Unfortunately, Jason, we have to cut this short. It's your website again and how people can reach you, and your book.
Yeah, the firm is called Alvarez Marsal, and I can be reached at jgreen@alvarezandmarsal.com. And the book is called Optimizing Growth. It was just selected as one of Forbes' recommended summer reading list for marketers, actually. And it's available, of course, on Amazon.
Oh, thank you. A link to his website will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear all of our shows, past and future. And you can also tell us via a quick survey what topics and ideas you would like Recalculating Radio to explore on future shows. Jason, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks very much.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your featured book. I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and changed them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
Welcome back to Recalculating, the program dedicated to American small business. Now it's time to bring together our two experts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella, as they discuss things that are happening now that are affecting your business success.
Dan, I'm really pleased with our next guest, Dr. Bob Nelson. He's here to talk about how to focus on behavior, more specifically employee behavior. He has a book, 1001 Ways to Engage Employees. It's a question every small business, every company has, and he's here to talk about it. Dr. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
First, tell us a little bit about your background and then a little bit about your book, please.
Yes, I had a book that has just come out called 1001 Ways to Engage Employees, help people do better what they do best. It's actually my 30th book. I spent my entire career working in the field of motivation and how companies can create better work environments where people can be more productive, fulfilled, and satisfied. The book is aimed primarily at managers and what they can do in their sphere of influence on a daily basis to help improve the connection with their employees. There's a false notion that a lot of people think that people just work for money, and money, of course, is important, but there's a lot of other things that make up having a good job, starting with having a good manager who takes the time to get to know you, to listen to you, to involve you in decisions, to seek out your opinion, and to support you even when you make a mistake. So the book goes into those elements that research indicates most impact how engaged people are in their jobs. So it's a research-based book, and the top 10 categories I then, in explicit detail, show people what those behaviors look like in the terms of actions of a manager and in the company to obtain the best results from employees.
Well, I'm going to go way out in left field because over the weekend I visited a new workplace in New York City. Well, it new to me, but where there were no walls, there were very few desks, and it was clearly designed for younger people. And I quite frankly felt out of place there, being an older person. And the manager there said that this type of place encouraged communication, encouraged her to better know her employees. And I sat there and I felt a little bereft because I've always preferred an office myself. Your thoughts on that subject?
Well, that is the wave of workplaces that are moving in a more open work environment where it's more of there is better interaction with employees. That the movement has come from European companies, and it has an efficiency actually where you can put more people in a tighter place. So there's a economy of savings if you give everyone an office. It takes a lot more space, obviously. So that's one advantage. But as that manager indicated, ideally it allows people to better interact. Now the downside is that although there's the power of technology with the right technology and headsets and whatnot, you can still have a very quiet work environment, even with a lot of people in an open area. I once was at a corporation that had, I actually couldn't believe it. There was like 500 people in one room, and you couldn't hear anyone because they're all on headsets and could just talk in a normal voice and be heard on the phone. And, it wasn't distracting at all. It was actually a very nice work environment. It was, the openness brought out more light, and it was it felt very good. But I could see where if you've only worked in closed offices and down a hallway and type of stuff, that having everyone out in the open can be a bit distracting. And the challenge that often occurs is that when people need to have a meeting, where do they do that? Because if you do it at your desk, then you'd probably be disturbing someone next to you. A lot of times that type of work environment will have side rooms around a large bullpen where people can take a personal phone call or a meeting with a client, that type of thing. Some work environments have moved towards there's no assigned offices at all, or even assigned desk, that you come in and you bring your work with you, and you're assigned a place to work, and it's different every day. I know someone that works for GSA in Washington D.C. that they just built a new building, and that's one of the ways they operate, where you have to schedule when you're going to be in the building. And they actually intentionally built it so it cannot house everyone. It can only house about 60% of the employees. So on any given day, you have to let them know when you're planning to be at work, so there'll be adequate number of spaces for people. Everyone else working from home.
Well, everything old is new again. But in 1968, I worked for Bell Labs, and I did a story about the Hawthorne Works, which you may have. It was a very famous. Yes. But what was funny was that they were proud of a picture in which they had a woman who was there in 1927, was at the same desk in 1968, and they had a picture saying this was a great thing. But she was the same woman at the same desk, almost 50 years later. And she still worked doing the same job.
Yeah,
and
so hopefully they're paying her more than back then. But that's one of the challenges of work today. If you have in a typical company, you have someone like you just mentioned, and if they get every year they get a 3% or a 5% increase, whether you call it a cost of living or whatever, then over the course of 10 years. She's being paid 50% more than when she started. Now, if she's doing the exact same job as she did 40 years ago, that's going to be a problem. She has to be doing increasingly more efficient work, maybe a broader scope of work. She has to be developed in her contribution to the organization. So that's the days of having the one set job that you do the same thing forever have pretty much gone away. Employees in every job, no matter what you're doing, you've got to constantly be improving and being more efficient and learning. And ideally, organizations are the same. They're constantly improving their processes, and they're asking everyone to make suggestions for how we can save money or better serve our clients or new innovations. I get excited about companies that systematize doing that, so that they're, as a group, getting better, as well as they individually are learning from each other and trying constantly new things.
I'm going to ask one more question and then pass it on to Dan. With so many organizations, big and small, eliminating layers of management, in effect reducing the paths to promotion, how do you keep employees engaged when there's so fewer levels to which they can aspire?
Well, yes, that's an excellent question. And in days of old, increase every year and promotion every 5 years and retirement party and we're done. Today, it is more challenging. The impact of technology has expanded the span of management, but it has taken a toll on the human element. We're more efficient, but it's harder to have meaning in the work. That is what often happens. In fact, a gentleman by the name of John Nesbitt back in 1985 wrote a book called Megatrends, where he did an analysis of major trends shaping the future and of work and of society. One of them was the more high tech we become, the more high touch we need to assimilate that technology. That otherwise we become alienated. And today, increasingly, everyone is spending more time on their cell phone and on looking at a computer screen, and their boss, who used to be in the office next to them, now might be in a different facility or a different time zone or a different country even. And we grope to allow people to have meaning within that context. How to do it is a big question, and I think that's one that I tried to address in my book, 1,001 Ways to Engage Employees. What are the things that create the connection and the value and the meaning at work today? And the top one, by the way, is a very simple one: recognition, thanking people for doing a good job. It's a human touch element that as you have a manager that does that, even if they're located in a different time zone, but if they're good at catching you doing things right when they know what you did, and they're close enough to the work you're doing that you finish the project or you close the sale, whatever it might be, and they acknowledge that in some way. A very simple, 10-second activity to thank someone for a job well done. That actually creates 56% of the feeling of engagement, of being a part of something larger than oneself. So the connection you get from other people around you, starting with your boss. If you have a good boss, you got a good job. That's true of the world around.
Dan, turn it over to you.
Thank you. Dr. Bob, every Friday, the Bureau of Labor Statistics gives us, every first Friday of every month, give us a statistical report and some observations about what's going on in the labor markets. In the most recent report, they discussed the issue of the transient nature of employees now. Yes. And that they said that about 43% of the people who responded to their survey fully anticipated to be in a different job in 12 to 18 months.
Or less, yes.
Or perhaps less. Now that we have a rapidly expanding economy, one of the greatest concerns of corporations, and growing concern of many corporations today, where do I get the human resources to capitalize on this tremendous growth opportunity that we're seeing in America today? One of the quickest ways is to try and steal employees from other companies. But this whole idea that we're leaving begs the question of loyalty to where you work.
Yes, and loyalty is pretty much shot, pretty much gone everywhere. And from our parents' time, you got a job, you stayed there your career. I've got a neighbor here in San Diego. He graduated college. He got a job with IBM. His mom cried, "You're set for life." And he was for the next 24 years until he was laid off. That was what it was all about. Today, that's a very rare thing today. Unless you're, as an individual, constantly innovating, learning, expanding your contribution to the organization, you can't. You've got to be making a difference. So the comment you made on the changing nature of work is very true. Right now, 40% of all employees work remotely. Soon to be 50%. That's huge, and also the nature of work. The standard 40-hour an hour work week is becoming history. That from before the recession, the Great Recession, most all hires were for 40-hour work weeks. The inverse relationship after the recession, many fewer, 60% of jobs are now not full-time work, but they're contingent work. They're project-based or part-time work. It's not uncommon for I was in the store a couple of weeks ago, and the cashier at the counter is a Bevmo, and he's yelling out loud to another employee, "Yeah, I've got an interview at 2:00." I'm going, "Gee, you might want to keep that down. Your boss might hear." And he says, "Oh, my boss knows I'm looking. Everyone here is looking for other work. We're all part-time." They got to have 2 or 3 jobs to actually earn a living. And that's becoming more and more common. So the project-based work and the part-time work, and we can lament that, but that's the changing times. I just worked last week with a national nursery in the landscaping and plant business, and they had a heck of a time holding on to people and hiring people. 60% turnover. And they said that someone would, a good worker they'd have that they valued and they thought they paid well. If lettuce harvest is coming in, they know that they can quit and go make 3 times what they're making right now for a short period of time, 1 month during that harvest, and then come back afterwards and be hired again. So it's people are trying to piece together a full-time job with part-time work, and all across the board. It's very common and causes a drastic change in what it means to hire someone and what it means to keep them. You take into account the millennials, the largest generation in the workplace, the younger workers today. The average tenure is 18 months. A year and a half. They're thinking that the day they start working for you, they already have a foot out the door. They're looking for the next job. They got their resume on, spread out. They all over the internet. They get pinged if someone views their resume. They're looking for the next job before they sat down at their desk in your job. You've got to have a much larger picture on what it means to hold on to that person if you're going to keep them more than 18 months, because already the odds are against you. So you've got to make a personal connection with that person to get to know them and their motivations, their aspirations, and then you got to use that information in assignments you make to make the job interesting and challenging, so it's engaging them so they want to stay. You got to help them develop skills and then apply those skills once they have them in perhaps new opportunities or expanded responsibilities, at which point you can pay them more because they're making more of a contribution to the organization. The game is shifted quite a bit in terms of the priorities in creating a truly motivating organization, where you can count on people being with you, doing the best job, wanting to stay, and then getting a reputation for being an employer of choice where that attracts other talent.
I would say, Dr. Bob, that there was a fundamental shift in corporate America that was driven by the central government that caused the whole disruption of full-time employment. And that was the passage of Obamacare. When corporations were forced to make decisions about hiring and time based on health care. And if you had less than 35 hours a week with an employee, you didn't have to provide health care. So I think that the central government, through the Obamacare, created a whole different psychology in the workplace and created not only the employees who were looking for a job because they could, as you said, get full-time work, and corporations, large and small, in order to reduce costs, said, I can only hire you for less than 40 hours a week, which meant that employee not only was looking for another job, but looking for a second job to provide income so that he or she could support himself or his family.
I think there's some truth to what you're saying. I wouldn't say it was any one thing that did that, but that certainly added to the changing trends in technology and the move towards worldwide labor. There's currently just on sites like Upwork, 3 million employees around the world that will do projects. So that's independent of any action with Obamacare. But with the start of Obamacare, for example, Walmart got out of the benefits business and said, you can get better benefits from the government. Good luck to you. And that saved them a lot of money right out of the chute. And then even before that, they'd already their entire workforce, and this is one of the largest employers in the country, no one worked 40 hours. This is before Obamacare. They all worked 37.5 hours was the standard number for each month or each week, and that was again part of that decision is to save on benefits. So there's truth to what you're saying. There's other factors that also have led to these changes in all industries competing against one another. So I'd say the competitive forces are another variable, and the impact of technology in the worldwide economy. But it's without a doubt also true to support your point that when Obamacare was passed, immediately some 3 million employees quit their jobs. Because typically older employees that they were mainly working for the benefit coverage where they were, that they didn't, maybe they didn't want to work. They're doing it because I've got benefits in case I get ill or sick. And now with Obamacare's, it used to have, maybe it doesn't now, but it used to have a guarantee of coverage regardless of your health history. And that was a great comfort and priority for employees. So to work for an employer that had benefits, a lot of people, especially older people, were doing that more for the benefits than for the money that was paid in the compensation.
I want to go down another path, and that is the what appears to me to be a conflict. There is a ever-increasing number of people who prefer to work from home, work remotely, in somewhat isolation. Now, there are people who say, well, I've got the internet and I've got Skype and I can do, but when you work from home and you're there by yourself, the creative process can be affected because of a consistent lack of interaction with other human beings grappling with similar problems. So I find it amazing that you talked about this new department of the government, which only has room for 60% of their employees, and you have to schedule when you come in, and you sit in isolation with headphones with no offices. I would have grave concerns that there is a diminished lack of human interaction, of sharing of ideas, and as a result, we're not as productive as we possibly can be.
Well, another very astute point. What the research shows is that actually people can be more efficient working on their own. There's no interruptions. There's no socializing. They can, depending on the type of work. On a project, they can work longer, deeper to get the work done. I've done that with people that I've employed, where I worked for a company that had 16 employees. We actually had people track their time, and we found that they were twice as efficient, and we could tell what they were working on, and twice as efficient at getting the work done on certain types of work, project-based work. Now, the contrary to that, though, is that if the work that needs to be done is more collaborative, that is hard to do individually, that you have to do that with others. And if you're not around, because it's a whole hassle to line people up, they're in different states and whatever, to find a time that works for everyone, that it's much easier if they're all right here in the building, and so there's been a lot of it's more supportive if you need collaborative type work, which is often a very important work for breakthroughs. And Melissa, the former CEO of Yahoo, She announced a number of years ago that they were suspending having people work from home for that reason, and she defended it. She said she wasn't dissing virtual work and telecommuting, but just for them, for where they were now, they needed people to collaborate more for the challenges they had, and she was able to point to very specific collaborations that had happened where people from different departments had talked and came up and solved a problem or came up with a new product solution. So she was able to defend her point. Best Buy also moved in that direction to away from allowing people independence and working from home. Now, so there's a yin and a yang to the topic, and it's not universally one way or the other. There's some people that prefer working, in the office and going in and keeping work separate from home and the socialization. I've done both, and at different times in my life, and they both have advantages. I know I worked on my own for 9 years, and I went to work for a company where I was an executive for 10 years. And I loved it. I loved the social element, the being in the meetings, executive meetings, the decision making. But then I got tired of it. To go to hear the same people go over the same opinions time after time. After a while, I wanted to shoot myself, and so I left that environment, and that was very empowering because it put me in charge of my own life and career much more so. In fact. The year I left of that company, I calculated how many standing meetings I had scheduled for the year, the first day of the year, 53 days worth of meetings I had to be a part of, the pricing meeting and the product development meeting and the executive meetings and the strategic retreats and the all-hands meetings, and 53 days worth of meetings. And it's like, oh my God, I'm going to lose it. So I gained back that time, which now I control, and I control more of my own future and destiny. Different parts, different people like different things. There's a lot of people that do not want the independence, that cannot function at home.
We've been talking with Dr. Bob Nelson. Doctor, tell us the website, and then I'll turn it back to Don.
Sure. I've got my website is www.drbobnelson.com. As simple as that. My new book, 1001 Ways to Engage Employees, is available wherever you would get books. You can get it from my website, but any store, Barnes & Noble, whatnot, Amazon certainly. I provide other services. I do a lot of books, but I also do consulting, and I do speaking for companies and conferences, associations, that type of thing.
Good. Don, back to you.
No, I was going to say, the one thing I miss about not working in an office is the Christmas party. Year after year, every Christmas, I go to a Christmas party, but it's usually somebody else's. But anyway, we're talking with Dr. Bob Nelson. I'm going to repeat his book, 1001 Ways to Engage Employees. A link to his website will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this and every other past and future program, and also tell us via survey what guests you'd like to hear. And also, we're happy to announce we're now on iTunes as well, so you can find us there as well. Thank you, Dr. Bob, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Recalculating.
Marcus Lemonis, J.D. Powers, and John Scully, and 100 other presidents and experts contributed to Recalculating the book. Why did all these people agree to contribute to the book? I'm Don Mazzella, and I'm the editorial director of Small Business Digest. And for 20 years, we have been offering small business leaders information and data to increase profits. Recalculating the book was named the best small business book by the Independent Press Association. Whether you need help with marketing, staffing, finance, operations, technology, or many other subjects, they're all here in Recalculating the book.
They're now available at Amazon at a reduced cost. We've also created the radio program Recalculating on recalculating.biz.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, if you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.